just unmute and ask me questions, please do so. I like to keep things kind of as informal as possible when doing these kind of presentations for stuff, especially with something like service and working with your local community. Everything is always can be very different depending on situations. So feel free to stop, share, anything of that nature. I don't anticipate us going the full hour for our session today, but I am excited to share this with all of you. So what we're talking about today is the Into the Streets program at the University of Pittsburgh at Greensburg. So this is just an example of some of the logos we've had all over the years. Any students that participate in Into the Streets, I've got a t-shirt. It becomes kind of a source of pride for some students to get their full collection. So a little bit about myself and Pitt Greensburg in general. So my name is Al Till. I am the Director of Student Involvement at Pitt Greensburg, as well as the Student Center operations. So what that means is I oversee all of the clubs and organizations at Greensburg. I oversee Chambers Hall, which is our student union on campus. And I work with our campus-wide service programs, leadership programs, kind of a lot of that stuff that's outside the classroom, beyond the career services and residence life. I generally will have my hand in one way or another. So about Pitt Greensburg, for those of you that aren't as familiar with the campus, generally we are looking at about 14 to 1,600 students. It is a 60% commuter campus. So it's a little, I think that's one of the things that makes it the most unique of any of the Pitt campuses kind of beyond Titusville, is that we're primarily commuter based. So our students live in the community, live with their families still. It's very much not so much just they just don't live on campus, but no, they commute from home. We do have students who do live off campus some. So with that, we have a lot of our students who are kind of already active in our community. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Westmoreland County is a unique county as well. So it is a very, very homogeneous county when it comes to diversity. So a lot of folks are coming from white background. It is an older population in the county. So the students who come to Pitt Greensburg primarily come from Westmoreland County and the surrounding counties. So a lot of them, when they're being tried to introduce the idea of service and doing those things, a lot of them already have those connections in their local community. So for us, when building Into the Streets, that's something that we kind of keep in mind. Okay, these students are connected with their local communities already. That's wonderful. How do we get them exposed to new experiences, new things? And how do we help kind of open their mind to what service can be, and the idea of serving your community beyond just the things that you see every day or the things that maybe can be very obvious for things. So we've had a few latecomers coming in. I said here at the beginning, if you've got any questions, anything of that nature, please stop me. You can either put something in the chat, unmute yourself, all that. We are going to try to keep this kind of as conversational as we can for things, while also learning more about Pitt Greensburg and Into the Streets. So Into the Streets, what is this program? So it is a week-long of concentrated service. We have several service organizations on campus that are doing programs kind of throughout the year, doing those things that you think of. So your Habitats for Humanity, your Circle Ks, our Outdoor Adventure and Community Service Learning Community. So they're doing the projects throughout the year. They have places that they've worked with. A lot of our clubs and organizations are doing their individual kind of service projects. But what Into the Streets is week long each semester where we're really focusing on getting students into the local community. And we are using it as a way to get students to see what these agencies are, as well as working to promote a lifelong appreciation of service and start getting that started ahead of time, getting that started as a college student. Additionally, we are providing this as a service to these community agencies. A lot of these agencies, they really look forward to Into the Streets over the years. They know that today, they know that that's a time where they can get student volunteers coming in to help with a project. So some places will essentially save a project for Into the Streets because they know it's happening. So we've been doing this since 2002. So going through all of our records, going through everything that we've done, there have been 91 unique project sites that we have done things with over the years. So I did a little bit of a word cloud there, talking about that. So, and I really loved that the idea of Westmoreland County was the biggest word in that, because that's who we are trying to service within the streets. We are focusing on Westmoreland County, focusing on the local community for all those things. So the other big words you see there are Greensburg. Like that's where we're at. But we are also doing projects throughout Westmoreland County. It's not just focused on the city, but going to the surrounding communities as well. So I'll go in a little more into the statistics of hours served and all that later on, but that's what Into the Streets is. It's giving students that opportunity to get involved with service, trying to concentrate it in that week, trying to get it so that they feel comfortable doing that as a group. So some of those sites that we do. So we do a mixture of on-campus programs and off-campus programs. So the on-campus programs will generally be doing something that we're going to take to a community thing. So one of our common ones is working to make blankets for the Linus Project, or working to make dog treats for the local dog shelters, local humane society, doing those things on campus for maybe students who don't feel comfortable going off campus, students who don't have a vehicle, and or students who just don't have the time to commit to going off campus, doing a project, and coming back to campus. So we're doing a mixture of the on campus, but primarily it is off campus. So some of our long-term sites, some of the folks we've been working with since almost the very beginning, are Meals on Wheels. Unfortunately, this fall, was one of the first years we weren't able to do anything with them. But the Blackburn Center, which is our violence prevention center in Westmoreland County, we try to partner with them every semester on a different project or initiative to help them out. Working with Animal Friends of Westmoreland County, so a local no-kill shelter. Those are just kind of some of our bigger long-term sites that we've kind of gone to every single year. And the ones that really do count on us, because they use that as a week, maybe that their regular volunteers aren't there, or they will save up a project for us. I know for another long-term one is the Wildlife Works. So Wildlife Works is an animal rescue center for wild animals. So it's not cats and dogs, but it is birds of prey. It is like raccoons, possums, those kind of things. And they really, they look forward to us to coming because we always come in the fall and the spring and we help get their trails and everything ready for the winter. And I think that's one of kind of a neat thing. And we're always looking for new sites as well, looking for things that we can go into and I can work with them to talk about, okay, what can our students do for you? What could I get in there to do as a one-day service project? Because that's one of the things that over the years we have worked really hard, and I've worked hard to talk to these sites, and the idea of a lot of places are looking for like long-term volunteers, and that's a goal of the programs, introduce students to these places that do need long-term volunteers. But we're also looking for ways to do 1 days of service. So working with sites to figure out, okay, how do we do a 1 day of service? So I mentioned Animal Friends. They're a place we've been working with for a number of years now. And it was a struggle in the beginning because they're like, well, we want people to come in. We want them to be doing long-term things. We want them to learn how to be dog walkers, do those things. A lot of our students, maybe they don't have that commitment yet, or they may not have the time to do that. So we've worked with them, and now they have really learned, or not learned, but they've really come to like, okay, we've got some projects we want done that our normal volunteers can't do. So I actually was there this afternoon with a group of students and some faculty members, and they were repainting the cages that needed painted because they were rusted. And we've painted their basement before. We've done some outside work for them. So they're reimagining what a volunteer can look like for them. And I think that's a really key component when you're doing any of these kind of things is how do you work with these sites to figure out, okay, how can we work for you? Some really kind of interesting things we've done over the years, working with Bots IQ, which is a local science competition that happened to coincide with our In the Streets program. So we had students going there to volunteer as judges to help run the event. And that was a really kind of neat opportunity for these students to go in and to be able to help with a project maybe that they experienced while they were a student, or to get that exposure in almost that classroom style setting for those education folks. We have done something with a project called Beads for Needs. That was a one-time thing where it was actually working with some alumni who are were working with the Shriners Hospital, where we made a couple thousand beaded bracelets over the course of a few days that week. That all those proceeds went to the Shriners Hospital, and all we had to do was supply the volunteers in the site. So that was a really kind of neat, unique opportunity. I said we've done stuff with the Blackburn Center, and the Blackburn Center's gotten really creative with what they're doing. We actually have a student group doing a focus group with them this week, because this happens to be our Into the Streets week. So we've got students doing projects this week. So they're doing a focus group with them, and I was helped to identify an organization on our campus that maybe has that unique expertise to do that. So they're working with La Femme, which is our kind of women's rights, women's issues group, to talk about, okay, how can we improve bystander training? So that was something that they're doing together, and I think it's a really kind of neat thing. And this year has been a big one for kind of unique projects. One of the ones I'm the most excited about, and it's not quite ready to go out, but they're working on it, is our student education group is reading books from diverse authors. And they are then going to be sharing those readings and recordings through YouTube, through embedded videos, through sending the videos to these child care centers, and so that they can still have those reading circles that we normally would have gone in and done as projects. That's something that students have loved to do. Is there's usually been one or two pre-K sites that have had students come in and read to the kids that week. And more than one student has said, I love doing that. That's something I do every week now. Well, there's a lot of places that don't want volunteers coming into their sites, but that's something we still wanted to do. So we worked with them, and they identified, well, we still want students to read books. Like, great. And our education group they took it and ran. So they started doing their recordings last week. I'm hopeful that they're going to be done here in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be sharing those out through the community. And that is, it's really kind of neat to me that we were able to do these service projects, be creative with it, and are meeting some needs in very different ways. When we plan our Into the Streets weeks, I also try to look at what's happening in the community. So these past few years, we've moved it earlier in October, Well, now we get to do something with an event called Hobgoblin Hikes. Hobgoblin Hikes benefits the local park system. So our students go dress up as scarers for Hobgoblin Hikes. That's not an event that's happening this year, but it's also one that I've worked hard to get to really kind of direct also towards our theater students, students who need kind of that, want that practical experience with costume makeup and doing those things. So it's providing this really, really great service to Hobgoblin Hikes while also giving students that opportunity. And that's what Into the Streets is, and that's what you can do with these smaller types of programs. Each semester, we generally will have between 100 and 150 unique students, faculty, and staff volunteering. We've been doing this for about 23 semesters. So when you look at that and you look at projects and all of those things, so over the 18 years we've been doing this, we have had 2,000 to 3,000 individuals participating in the streets. For us, to me, that's a phenomenal thing for a campus like Pitt Greensburg, where we have students working with that every single year. Now, how do we get all this to work? So one of the kind of the big things is we've stayed flexible with it. We've thought about it and we've reimagined things. So, and we've made Into the Streets part of a campus culture that's not just that, okay, we do service this week, but it's built into different programs on campus. So it is incorporated into our seminar, our freshman seminar cornerstone courses, where several of them say, okay, as your projects, as an expectation for this semester, you are going to be doing Into the Streets programs together. It is part of our Greensburg Experience More program. So Greensburg Experience More is our co-curricular program that we developed. If you're familiar with the OCC, it's kind of like the OCC where there are different requirements and electives, different areas. Well, doing Into the Streets and getting 40 service hours over your time while a student is part of that. So Into the Streets is a key thing there. We have gone from doing it once a year when I started, doing it 3 days once a year, to doing it for 1 week each semester. And part of that has been because of how much it's kind of gotten ingrained in some of our student culture and our programs beyond just itself. Part of it's because the sites wanted more things. A big part of it's the students wanted more of that. The students really look forward to that. So we've looked to figure out, okay, how does that work? A few years ago, we used to do it in November for our fall one, right before Thanksgiving. Well, we've shifted it now to also connect with the Pitt Make a Difference Day. So trying to make it also part of a bigger system-wide push for service to give that commonality, so that way when students at Greensburg see these things on the news and see the social media about all the students who've been involved with Pitt Make a Difference Day and that, they know they were part of that too. So it's also building up that Pitt identity for students. So it's not just about service, but it's about building identity and really focusing in on being a holistic student too when you look at our GEM program. And one of the biggest things, and I think one of the more successful parts, is really trying to encourage clubs and teams to get involved with Into the Streets. We started doing that probably about 5 years ago, where if a group has 5 individuals participate in projects throughout that week, they will get money added to their fundraising accounts. That's something our student government has sponsored. They are happy to do it. It's a way for, it accomplishes several goals. The first is that it encourages our clubs and organizations to do more bonding and community building together. It gives these groups a way to do some small fundraising without having to put their own expenses out there. And it also has increased the number of students who participate in the program. So it's really just, it's accomplished quite a few goals for not a huge amount of money. You less than probably $2,000 a semester is spent on those incentives, but those groups that take advantage of it really appreciate it, and I think it does make a difference to them and to what their group is doing. And also I find the groups that do take advantage of it and go to these things together, they're stronger organizations because they're able to just focus on the project that they're at. They don't have to focus on the running of it. They don't have to focus on the setting up or the organizational parts of it. They're able to focus just on being together as students. And I think it's a powerful thing. I think sometimes we encourage our clubs and organizations to do service, and I love for them to do that. But I find sometimes the student leaders are just, they see it as another part of their role. Within the streets, they can just go and enjoy it just like any other student does. And I think that's one of the big things that the club and the team incentives have really done. Logistics, how to actually run the week then. That is one of the, I think struggles the wrong word, but one of the challenges. I'm essentially a one-person office. I have an assistant director who I share with our academic village. Her main focus is with our programming board. She does a wonderful job with that. I oversee a lot of different things on campus. We don't have an office of service at the Greensburg campus or at any of the regionals as far as I know. So how do we do a project like Into the Streets where we're gonna have 20 to 30 sites and 150 volunteers coordinating schedules and t-shirts and all those things. If you've thought, how do we do that? Sign Up Genius. Sign Up Genius is a wonderful, wonderful service. It is a relatively inexpensive service. And it's really, really just nice for automating this stuff so that the sites can go to visit that and see exactly how many people they have volunteering for each thing. Students can see who else has volunteered. It has that opportunity so they can connect with each other to carpool if they want. It sends out your automatic reminders for you. And it's really just made it so much easier to focus on the important parts of the program, which are the student experience and the site experience, and less so worrying about, okay, how do we send out reminder emails? We're doing a week-long thing, and there may be other things that come across my plate. So it's just been a really, really nice resource. So I encourage anybody who's thinking about, okay, I'm trying to start a mid-size to smaller service program, and we need an easy to use tool. I encourage you, Sign Up Genius, wonderful, wonderful thing. Never had any issues with them. Really, just it's a good place. So, and it's been one of the ways that's allowed us to stay flexible with the sites. So now this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the presentation. And kind of probably why a lot of you came. When you're working with a program like Into the Streets, and you're working not on a small scale, because I don't consider Into the Streets a small scale, at least for the Greensburg campus, but you're working with individual organizations, and you're working with these places that maybe don't have a huge infrastructure. So I'll use our Meals on Wheels, for example. The Meals on Wheels group that we work with is Tri-City Meals on Wheels. They have one person. They have one paid staff member. So they don't have a volunteer coordinator, because their volunteer coordinator is also their head chef, their orderer, their purchase manager, and their secretary. So I want to work with these sites to figure out, how do we meet their needs while not causing them extra work? And I think when you're doing stuff and when you're trying to work with community organizations, especially those smaller groups who who really do count on the volunteers as the people that keep them running. How do you do that? How do you build those relationships? And that's the key thing there, is the idea of building those relationships with them, having open communication with them, and figuring out what works, what doesn't work for them. There may be projects that you come up with a site that you think are going to be wonderful, that students are going to love. It's just not going to turn out well. The students aren't going to go. The students aren't, or maybe the students that do go, they don't get anything out of it. And the site realizes that they had to spend more time prepping for that project than what they got out of it. So it's working with the sites to figure out, okay, how do we build an experience that's going to be beneficial to the students, and they're going to get something out of it, they're going to learn, and they're going to want to go back to and experience again, and be a regular volunteer for you, while also, when the students are coming to see you, they are not going to be just adding to your pile of work. Because when students are going to these sites, there's generally not a representative from the university there, another administrator or a faculty or staff member. I mean, these are, because we're doing so many of these things, it's very, very kind of independent for that. So the sites need to be having projects that they don't have to monitor the students all throughout. And it's really been about communication with them and figuring out, like, okay, what works for you. I use actually 2 hours ago as an example, working with our Animal Friends organization. I happen to go to the project because that's something I volunteer with them regularly. And I was very clear with them kind of throughout the week, like, here's how many volunteers have signed up. This is what we're doing with things. And it was something that they had needed done, and we were painting wire fences. And I think the students there were having a good experience. The site had a good experience, but we didn't have as many people sign up for the project as I had hoped. But that didn't stop it from being a success, because that communication had been happening. They knew that maybe we weren't going to get the entire way through the project, and they were okay with that. They were just helpful to get some people there to help with things. And I have found with 90% of the agencies that I've worked with, the organizations we've worked with here, as long as you have that clear communication with them, they are always thankful for the help. The only time I've ever gotten negative feedback for things is when that communication's fallen apart and they thought they had people coming to help them, and they had a project that was set up that they needed at least 7 people to do and only 2 showed up. That's where it's fallen apart in the past. So just having that communication, and it doesn't need to be a ton of communication. It doesn't need to be every day, but it's setting up things so there are very clear kind of expectations for the site to understand, like, hey, we are putting this out to students. We cannot guarantee that the students are going to be there. We can't guarantee that the students are going to respond to it. We're going to put it out there. We're going to push it. But because of the way Into the Streets works, we're doing projects all throughout the week. It's not just one day of projects. And a lot of these places, they're open during regular business hours. So we've done our best to make it a better experience for the students by trying to make them 2-hour time blocks instead of a 4-hour, because sometimes students don't have 4 free hours in their day. Try to put them in the mornings, the afternoons. If there are evenings, we try, but a lot of places don't have those evenings. But setting up that expectation with the sites that, hey, we're going to try. This may not work out. If it doesn't, I'm going to communicate that to you well ahead of time. So when I say well ahead of time, 3 to 4 days, where I'll email a site and say, hey, you only have 1 person signed up right now for your project. What would you like to do? And sometimes they'll say, you know what, this just isn't going to work for us. Let's cancel this. And I say, hey, thank you for that feedback. Sorry about that. We'll try again next semester. And that gives me time then to communicate that to the student. Like, hey, this project is not happening anymore. I'm sorry about that. I encourage you to sign up for a new project, and I'll look ahead of time and see, okay, is there another project at that time frame that I can push them towards? Or the site will say, okay, that's fine. We're not getting the response we expected. We've got a smaller thing that we'd like them to work that could be interesting for them. And I'll say, okay, great, thanks. Let me check with the students. So I'll send that new thing to the students. I've never had a student say, no, I'm not doing it. But it just builds up a different expectation for the site and for the students who are experiencing it. And as long as you are managing those expectations, it's going to be a success for what you're doing. And as long as the students are getting those right kind of expectations, as long as the volunteers are, when we do our feedback, I do some formal and informal feedback, a mix for these things. The only time I ever get really negative feedback is when they go to something that they signed up for that wasn't what they expected. And that's the only time I ever get that negative feedback. So it's just making sure that communication is open, is honest, is accurate as possible. Because it is, you're working with these individual places, you're working with places who maybe don't have that huge volunteer coordinator part. They need these students for a day or for a few hours. So having those kind of clear things. And it's also the projects that have been the most successful are those ones that have that real impact, that have that visible impact that students can see and say, you know what, I did that. So Meals on Wheels, that's one of the reasons I think it's been a long-term and one of our most successful things, because the students who go to that project, they see the meal they made. They get to package that up and get that sent to and see the people who are delivering it. And they get the story about what Meals on Wheels is. And it's just really, really meaningful to them. Those are the ones that have the most success, are those ones that really do, that they can see that tangible impact that they've had. And with Meals on Wheels, at one point, we had students helping with the delivering of the meals. And after talking with the site coordinator, talking with students, realized, you know what, that's just not working. That's not, the students aren't having a good experience with it. Their normal volunteers aren't terribly comfortable with it. So you know what, we just stopped doing that part. But we looked at, okay, what can we do with you to make it better for students? So instead of having one longer shift, we split it up into two different shifts, where one group of students came in and helped make the meal, and another group came in to help package and get the meal ready to go and clean up. And that made that experience so much better for the students, because more students were able to participate and do that early morning or do that mid-morning thing. And it also made it a lot easier on the site to not have to change their routine with the deliveries, because that's a very regimented thing. But the making of the meal is something where the students really got that hands-on experience, got to meet the volunteers, got to see their impact. And it's having that flexibility with things. One of the things I always say when I'm talking with new professionals or student leaders about volunteering is they don't have to do it. A student volunteer does not have to be one. If they go to a project and it was just not good, they're probably not going to come back. And so it's your job as kind of someone who's coordinating those things. How do you make sure they want to come back? How do you make sure that the experiences that they're having as students, as volunteers, are impactful to them? And how do you make sure the sites are having that experience that they want students to come back? It truly needs to be a collaborative effort to kind of make those things happen. And you've got to be making those impacts that the students can see. The sites, if a site says, well, we have this storage room where we just need these files sorted. Like those are things that they need. And there are some students who really get a ton out of that, but they're not the ones that students are excited about, or that a student will email me about afterwards and be like, that was so much fun, or that was so great. Like they're like, yeah, we sat in a room and sorted files for 2 hours. Probably not the most dynamic kind of thing. So it's getting those things that students are making that true impact, who they can see what's going on. And it's being just really helping the sites understand that flexibility too. And what I've told sites and what I've told students and what I've told people is there is no such thing as a bad idea when it comes to those stuff. So it's not a bad idea when it comes to these sites. And tell me what you need. Let's figure out how to make that what's going on with those things. So I just saw this in the chat. Yeah, the volunteer.pitt.edu is a wonderful thing too. I would say if you have access to that, use that too. I haven't had a lot of experience with that one. So I do a lot of communication with Chaz about kind of how that all looks later on. So he'll get my reports a little separately, but yeah, whatever it is, making sure that you have kind of that mechanism for getting the students signed up. The easier that is for the students, the better it's going to be for their experience. And the easier it is for the sites to be able to check on things, the more it takes off your plate and just feeling like you have to update sites every day, when you can just say, okay, when you send out your signups, you can copy all the sites so that they can go and see what's going on with that. And I've said this a few times in here, but also it's just being willing to say, you know what, this didn't work. And evaluating, like, why didn't this work? Did it not work because students didn't get clear instruction from me? Did I not set up those expectations early enough? Did it not work because the site and I had a different vision of what the students were going to be doing there? Or did it not work because the site just wasn't prepared for us? Or was it just a bad project? It's really having those honest conversations and making sure that that no one is leaving with hurt feelings, no one's leaving with thinking they weren't appreciated, but it's just being open and honest and having those things. And if you've built those relationships with the sites, that's going to make that easier. It's going to make that better, and it's going to make it just a better kind of thing. So we've kind of reached the end here. So I do want to open this up for questions. I want, if there are folks who are trying to think about, like, if you're trying to run service programs on these kind of levels, I'm willing to talk through that now with you, or take any feedback. Future projects, things that I'd love to get involved with. Students are always like, I want to do more with animals. So we've really tried to get a lot more projects with animals. We've recently partnered with Knickers and Nays, which is a horse rehabilitation site that we've had some good success with so far. Students are always just, they want to do stuff with kids and with animals. So figuring out how to make those happen. We've done better with that. We're going to keep doing better with that. Doing more on-campus projects that are not just essentially crafts, which are important and they have their place, and we do a ton of them, and I never want them to go away. But how do we also make sure that we're giving our students that experience on campus, that they're getting that kind of meaningfulness that they would have gotten if they went into the local community as well? Figuring out a transportation thing. So because of the way we do our projects, we don't provide transportation to our projects. This is something where we encourage students to kind of do that on their own. But how can we do that a little differently in the future? How can we make sure that we're doing things that help, that make the most sense for students, that get them to these places, just doing that a little more. So yeah. So I want to open the floor here. Are there any questions, feedback, comments? I will share this. I have no ego. So if there is something in here you're like, that didn't make any sense, please ask me, because you may be right. And it may be, I look at that. So how are you keeping volunteer activities, students engaged with virtual platforms, and adapting that thing? So that's where the Blackburn project that I was talking about has really made that difference. It's a virtual kind of roundtable that they're doing, where they're giving students that chance to give that feedback and essentially have a focus group when it comes to that. And when we're looking to do virtual stuff, one thing we've consistently heard from students, and a lot of you have probably heard from students, is they're getting zoomed out. They're sitting in class, they're doing those things all day. So when we've been looking at how do we get students projects, so it's working with the sites to make sure you're having smaller. So if you want to go to these places, having them smaller. So thinking like, okay, you're not going to get 25, 30 students here at once. You can get 5 or 6. So working smaller on those things. Working to give students the areas so that way when our individual service organizations are doing programs, they're doing them in a virtual way. So they're having their meetings where they're doing a project at it, but they're also having packages that they can pick up, that their members could pick up to do in their own room too, while also building that community and doing those services. I think service is one of the hardest things to do virtually. It's very difficult. Because you want students to have those engagement and doing those things and being at those sites and making that, getting their literal hands dirty. But the roundtables with local agencies, the reading program that our education group is doing, those have been really creative ways that they're still doing that stuff and they're still having those impacts when it comes to making a difference in the community. Can you do a virtual park cleanup? No. And if you figure out how to do a virtual park cleanup, let me know, because we have got $1 million idea together. But no, you can't do a virtual park cleanup. You can't do a virtual dog walking program. So it's helping students kind of stay excited about the opportunities that they know that are going to come back, that they know are going to be real experiences for them. And to know that, you know what, this is we are in a very temporary time right now. And that doesn't mean you can't still do service. That doesn't mean you still can't learn and grow. You just kind of gotta maybe adjust your expectations a little bit. Sydney, I don't know if that was a great answer to that. I don't have a good answer to that quite yet. So if you find a person that has the good answer on how to keep volunteer and service just as engaging in the virtual component, please share that, because I don't know if anybody's come up with a great way to do any of that stuff yet. So is there any other questions or things? Incorporate reflections and learning opportunities of volunteers outside of direct service. How do you make the experiences more meaningful? So one of the big ways we do that is when students are wanting to get credit for their service, for the GEM program, for their Cornerstone programs, it's not just putting in, okay, I went and painted a fence for an hour. That's not what we do. What you have to do is do an actual reflection with that opportunity. So talking about, okay, and then that reflection's reviewed by a staff member, um, and we will challenge them on those things. If they just said, I went and paid a fence, it was fun. No, that's not a reflection. Like, what did you get out of this? What did you learn from them? What did you gather for that? So and our cornerstones do the same thing, or for students doing service because they need to do community service hours, because of a judicial reason. It's not just having somebody sign off and say, yes, you did this, but it's making them submit. And it doesn't have to be long. It's 2, 3, 4 sentences about, what did you get out of this experience? What did you learn from it? What was your favorite parts about it? And those have been, I think, really good for especially for our Greensburg experience, more students, for our GEM students, it's made them think about what service has meant to them more than just what it was. And so when we do, every student who completes GEM, they do an interview with some of the coordinators, and the reflections are the big part of that. And there have been so many times where students have talked about, when we were talking about their service component, that they realized, like, hey, I'd done this in high school. I did it because I needed to get 100 service hours to get this award. And they talk about their GEM experiences very differently, because it was like, okay, I started doing these things because I want to get my 40 hours in. But as I was asked to reflect on them, as I was asked to log them a little differently, I realized that it was something that I enjoyed doing more and that I got something out of. And we also try to make sure that make these experiences more meaningful. We were trying to make them an individualized experience too. That's one of the great things about doing a project like Into the Streets, where you're focusing on many different sites with a lot of different opportunities. Students can find that individual experience that resonates with them more. We all love doing, and we're doing a trail cleanup this weekend as part of our Into the Streets program. We're doing a creek cleanup where we're going to have the bigger kind of big programs that you're going to have in a normal year. You're going to have hundreds of students at. I always love seeing the pictures of the buses all lined up for Make a Difference Day. And those are wonderful things, and students love those. But those individualized experiences, so where 2 or 3 of them are going to Meals on Wheels in the morning, where they're really having that experience, where they're talking to the people that have been doing it for years. That's where I think they get that meaning out of, and where they realize that it's more than just the actions they're taking, but it's about the lives they're impacting. So it's having, I think, a variety of things that students can find something that's their individual kind of niche when it comes to that. And then if they want to get official credit for things, for classes or for co-curricular programs, having it more than just, okay, how many hours, where was it at, who was the person supervised, but challenging them to do those 3 to 4 sentence reflections. I think that's really helped make the experiences a little more meaningful. All right, so unless anybody has any other questions, comments, concerns, feedback, that's kind of the end of our presentation today. Yeah, let me put my contact information right here in the chat. And for those of you watching, my email is aj58@pitt.edu. Oh, I sent that privately. It's been a long day, folks. This is why you don't do presentations at 4 o'clock someplace. But yeah, my email is ajt58@pitt.edu. Feel free to email me with any questions you may have, or if you would just want to have a conversation about it. Like I said, I'm willing to share and talk with people about things. I think that's the way we grow through stuff, is through conversations, through figuring out like, how do you make this individually work for you and for your situations. So yeah, please reach out to me with any questions or any feedback, or just, if you just want to say hi. We're all in a semi-isolated world right now, so I think those connections are more important than ever. All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for joining today. That kind of ends our presentation. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to me speak. And good luck with any projects that you're doing for the rest of the week, and have a nice day.